Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. This week my supporters on Patreon voted for the Infinite Guideline Station to be featured, as we can now play with legendary vehicles and a legendary spacecraft as our commander as well. This 5-colored spacecraft says when it enters, create a tapped 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token for each multicolored permanent you control. So this deck is all about increasing the number of multicolored permanents as quickly as possible. Once we get that number high enough, we can deploy our commander, make lots of tapped robot tokens, and then on the following turn we can use those to station the Infinite Guideline Station. Once we get to 12 or more counters, we now get a 7/15 flyer, and when it attacks we draw a card for each multicolored permanent we control. So that's another very nice payoff. So if we take a look at our deck overview, the deck is filled to the brim with multicolored spells, and not just multicolored spells, but actually multicolored permanents. So either artifacts, creatures, enchantments, or maybe even planeswalkers, most of which also generate multicolored tokens, which also contribute towards our multicolored permanent count, so we can get that number as high as possible to set up our station. So if we take a look at the deck breakdown, I've tried to split it up into a few different categories. The first one being mana acceleration, because we are trying to get as many permanents in play as quickly as possible, so any accelerants are useful. Now of course I am skipping most of the typical 1-mana accelerants, since they're not multicolored and don't necessarily fit the theme, so we are kind of playing a turn behind, but we're also going to be busy fetching tapped tri-lands in the early turns to set up our mana, so it kind of works out that we're getting a tap land on turn 1, and then hopefully casting an accelerant on turn 2, so we can further deploy our mana and our other spells. And then we've got our removal section, and I would play as many multicolored interactive spells as I can get my hands on, but of course the list of those is not very long when we need them to be permanents as well, so it's mostly artifacts and enchantments that can enter and remove an opposing permanent, or maybe creatures with a nice enter the battlefield ability that can double up as interaction. And then we've got our multicolored threats. These are cards to kind of fill out the deck, as well as more multicolored cards that synergize specifically with the Guideline Station. So if you were to, let's say, swap out the Guideline Station with a different commander, like one of the Niv Mizzets, this is probably a list of cards that you would not necessarily want to include, but they do synergize well with all the tokens we're making and the artifacts we're generating. So that's something to keep in mind. And then last but not least, we also have a few more payoffs for playing multicolored cards, because as you'll notice, I'm not playing any triple colored cards, even though those would still satisfy the condition on the Guideline Station, but the two Niv Mizzets want you to have specifically 2-colored multicolored cards, so then we may as well meet those conditions as well. And then Bring to Light can also find those when necessary. So that's kind of our rough breakdown. Now for the deep dive, starting with our mana acceleration. I did include Chromox despite it not being multicolored, but we need all the help we can get. Deathrite Shaman's actually one of our better cards, since there's plenty of fetch lands in the deck to enable it, and it's a multicolored 1-mana accelerant that can also double up as Graveyard Hate. Bloom Tender, another one of the few non-multicolored spells, but of course has great synergy in a deck that can produce all 5 colors pretty quickly. Then Farseek is another one of our few exceptions, as it can fix our colors by getting one of the various tri-lands. Then there's Lotho, making a treasure whenever a player casts a second spell at the cost of 1 life. Got the Skull Prophet, making black or green. Tycoon can tap to make a treasure token. Ruby and the Mentor can make red or green mana. Catilda makes green or white, has protection from werewolves, could also come up. There's a Kiora's Follower, can untap another target permanent, so can use it to just untap a land, can untap a mana creature like Bloom Tender, which makes more than 1 mana, so that's also quite synergistic, or we can just use it to give one of our creatures pseudo-vigilance. Then there's a Merleaf Pixie, making blue or green with flying. Got the Root Coil Creeper, makes a mana of any color. Then Arcane Signet, another one of our few exceptions, making a mana of any color. And at 3 mana, there's Clothis, also goes well with all the fetch lands and more difficult for the opponent to remove, letting us make additional red or green mana. Faber Elder, similar to Bloom Tender, but also multicolored, so has even more synergy. Then we've got the Engineer, making blue and green mana if we tap it. Xenagos can make multicolored satyrs, so those also contribute towards our multicolored count, and then can also make additional mana with a +1 potentially. There's a Cultivator, getting either a forest or an island when it enters, and Mirari's Wake can double our mana produced by our lands, so that's also quite exciting. Also pumping the team is relevant when we're going wide with a bunch of 2/2 tokens, and the Chromatic Orrery can also kind of fix our colors, but mostly a way to make 5 mana, and a way to draw 5 cards with our Guideline Station in play. Then we continue on to our removal. In black-red, we've got the Analysis dealing 3. Invasion makes the opponent sacrifice a creature or planeswalker. Then the Aegis can exile an opposing creature when it enters. The Tension Sphere can exile any non-land permanent, as well as more of those permanents that share the same name, can be relevant against multiple tokens. Reflector Mage can bounce something, preventing the opponent from replaying it for a turn. Oath of Kaya deals 3 and gains 3, also have a few planeswalkers to synergize with it. Knight of Autumn can destroy artifacts and enchantments. Airtie can destroy creatures when it enters, although the opponent does get to draw a card in return. Hostage Taker can exile creatures or artifacts that we can potentially replay. Then there's a Binding, destroying any non-land permanent. On Chapter 2 it also helps us ramp, but of course it does go away eventually, so it doesn't stick around forever as a multicolored permanent, but can still maybe get some use out of it. And then Buried in the Garden can exile any non-land permanent, and then the land we're enchanting also produces extra mana. We've got Roxanne dealing 2 damage with a Meteorite, which can also make additional mana for us. Leyline Binding can exile any opposing non-land permanent, often for just a single white mana, so that's another one of our exceptions, but plays quite well in a 5-color deck where we're often getting to the full domain. Then Ethereal Absolution can shrink down opposing creatures while pumping our own, also plays well in kind of a go-wide deck, and a great answer to a bunch of opposing 1-toughness creatures. Can also use it as graveyard hate to pump out additional black and white spirit tokens, which also contribute towards our multicolored permanent count. And then there's Garruk making multicolored wolf tokens that can increase its loyalty when they die, and can also be used as removal, destroying a creature and drawing a card, but can also work towards the emblem. And then we've got our additional threats, starting with Thopterix, which can protect our other legendary permanents, which can also come in handy. Then Baleful Strix is just a good card, 1/1 Flying Death Touch that replaces itself. There's Psychic Frog, which can also maybe get a couple attacks in, or we can keep it back and threaten to put additional +1 counters on it. Cranial Ram plays well with all the artifact tokens we're making with our commander, so we can increase the power it grants as an equipment. We've got the Territorial Kavu, also good with Domain, as we can often get a 5/5 with additional upside. Voice of Resurgence punishes the opponent for casting spells during our turn, and can also leave behind a large elemental token, which is still multicolored. Glissa is also pretty good if it manages to connect, drawing extra cards or maybe blowing up enchantments. There's Prosper, which can provide additional card advantage, maybe making some treasures in the process. The Swarmweaver enters making a pair of multicolored insect tokens, so that's 3 multicolored permanents for just 4 mana. And the Bloodbraid Elf can cascade, often finding another multicolored permanent in the process. And then we've got our section that synergizes with our commander specifically. Reese the Redeemed can activate for 6 mana, and then we get to make an extra copy of each token we control, so pretty good with all the robots we're generating, which will now enter untapped, by the way. Then there's the Pilgrim, which can gain life for each creature that enters, and if a creature dies, we get to drain the opponent for 1. Also pretty good when we're making a whole bunch of tokens. Then Golbaz from Final Fantasy, also very synergistic, because we get to Surveil 1 whenever an artifact enters, so that can trigger several times of our robots, and then with enough artifacts in play, it can also return creatures from our graveyard to our hand. Arabella, if it attacks with lots of creatures, can also drain the opponent for a ton of damage. We've got the Anthem of Champions, giving the team +1/+1, and War Leader's Call not only gives the team +1/+1, but also deals 1 damage to the opponent whenever a creature enters, also quite good with all those robots. Malcator makes a 3/3 Golem token when it enters, and whenever 3 or more artifacts entered, which we can usually set up with our commander. And then there's Urza, giving artifact creatures +2/+2, and can also activate it for 6 mana to make a token that's a copy of an artifact we control, so that can also make additional robot tokens by just simply copying our commander, even if we keep the original and get rid of the extra legend. And then we've got our Niv-Mizzet section, with Bring to Light being able to essentially tutor up whatever spell we want, but we're often going for Niv-Mizzet Reborn, which is one of the main payoffs for playing all these 2-colored permanents. A 6/6 flyer, when it enters, reveals the top 10 cards of our library, and then for each color pair, aka for each guild, choose a card that's exactly those colors and put it into our hand. So that can often draw us 5 or 6 cards at the very least. And then a Niv-Mizzet Guild Pact is another card that cares about multicolored permanents specifically, and 2-colored permanents to be precise. So another card where we want to increase the number of guilds that are represented on the battlefield pretty much, and then when it deals combat damage to a player, we get to deal X damage, draw X cards, gain X life, where X is the number of those guilds that are represented on the battlefield. And I've also sorted the deck by guild. The only one we're missing is the Izzet guild, since usually Izzet cares about casting lots of instants and sorceries, which is not what we're all about. There is one card that we could consider, as it gives us additional +1 counters whenever an artifact enters, so that could also synergize with the Guideline Station, but it ended up being one of the final few cuts. Otherwise, we've got a pretty reasonable distribution. Of course, some colors, especially the green ones, are overrepresented, since we need additional mana acceleration to get things going, but otherwise we've got as many cards in each guild as possible. And then you've probably noticed Gigantha as our companion as well, and I didn't need to make many compromises to include Gigantha. The main card I left out because of it is the Outlaw's Merriment, which is another way to make multicolored tokens each turn, although can be a little slow to get going in a deck that's already kind of slow. So Gigantha potentially gives us access to another multicolored 5-drop that can also make 5 colors of mana, so it can also help cast our commander in those longer games. And then the mana base, of course, has access to a ton of fetch lands, which can get our various shock lands, tri lands, or basics. I've got one of each of the new Capenna tri lands. Don't want to play all 10 of them, since that's a lot of tapped lands, but these are very useful to get early on to get our colors sorted. Then, of course, one of each shock land, which are also important to be able to search up. And then I'm also playing the slow lands, which we can play untapped starting turn 3, and those don't require any life payment, luckily. And then one of each basic. These are still snow-covered basics, since I was running into the north for a while, but you could just replace them with regular basics now that I'm not playing it anymore. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play, facing Thalia and the Gitrog monster. Our hand is a little awkward, since we cannot actually play Farseek on 2. So it would be turn 3. And then my hand's got some okay tools. Yeah, I'll try it. Best case scenario, draw an untapped land so we can Farseek on 2. Can maybe set up a Buried in the Garden on the following turn already. Alright, it's going to be a tap land. But drawing a land is still good. So next turn, Farseek. Opponent's got a Fanatic. Probably want to take care of that as soon as possible. And then which color to get? Maybe an extra green source. Go for Proving Ground. And then I would still like to draw an extra land. If they play their commander, my lands will likely enter tapped from now on. They've got an extra land drop, and Mirari's Wake would be lovely to get down. So yeah, let's still bury, and I think I still go for Fanatic. Because they can pretty easily play a 4-powered creature, make another 4 mana. And Thalia, they can eventually redeploy anyways. Even though it's gonna hurt right now. Yeah, they had the Overlord, which would have combined with a Fanatic as well. But they are ramping quite a bit. And also presenting a lot of damage. So I can Mirari's Wake, a land will enter tapped. But I still wouldn't be able to double spell even if it entered untapped here. Alright, so if Mirari's Wake sticks around, we could do something powerful next turn. But everything entering tapped means I'm not going to be able to protect myself all that well. So we could just die, even with a bunch of permanents in play. Now the Black Overlord. So if I take 10, next turn I could chump, take 9, assuming there's no removal. Night of Autumn can now blow up the Mirari's Wake. So I'm only going to get one turn with it. And the Overlord kind of fuels Thalia for free. Still gonna take it now, since I need the extra multicolored permanents. So what are my options? Make a bunch of mana. Red. green, black, and a white. Blue, and more white. So I could technically try and play Station and activate Reese, but the tokens, despite normally entering untapped, would enter tapped because of Thalia and the Gitrog monster. So that's not an option. So then I can go Golbaz, play Xenagos, play Station. Could make a Satyr first, but let's say we play Station, then I can still make a bunch of mana with Xenagos. Which I can maybe use to cycle Xander's Lounge and look for an answer. Cranial Ram doesn't do it. Knight of Autumn can destroy an enchantment, so that works. Although I guess never mind, I don't have white mana to actually cast it. So that doesn't help me. Alright, I mean, I'll still draw into it. Giganta in hand, pass a turn. And then jump with Reese, which would have been lovely to activate with all these tokens. But we're probably dead to a removal spell. Augur of Autumn, so not dead yet. We're also one artifact away from enabling Golbaz to get a creature back from the graveyard. I'll land off the top, thanks to Augur. And they have Coven enabled, so they could play creatures off the top as well. Alright, so it looks like we might still survive this. Barely. Well, their opponent can also have a look with a Deep Cavern Bat. So they have to decide between Bat or Knight of Autumn. Alright, opponent's got an Acquisitions Expert as well. Get rid of Giganta. It's not gonna do much for me, especially with it entering tapped. And then a Deep Cavern Bat probably goes for Knight of Autumn, since Arabella needs to be attacking to trigger the ability. Still goes for Arabella. And Root Clothis. Interesting. So let's see. So I've got a decent amount of power in play. So let's start stationing. Xenagos is probably making mana. Could play some multicolor permanents first, just to increase the draw of Station. Clothis enters untapped, since, yeah, it doesn't actually count as a creature, so that's pretty helpful. And then Knight of Autumn could also gain life. Although I imagine destroying an artifact is going to be more beneficial. Get rid of the Black Overlord, perhaps. Attack with a Station. Draw a bunch of cards. And Artai Resurrected is very useful. Opponent jumps. So I can make a bunch of mana with the Xenagos. And then gotta be careful here to tap appropriately. So Can make a bunch of black and blue. Play Airtie, and then my creatures can enter untapped once I deal with Thalia. Can play Creeper with extra blue mana. Not sure if I want to play Lotho, because we're at 2, so that's a little sketchy, but I guess our opponent can only trigger it once in their turn. So that might be alright. Surveil Rubin to the graveyard. And pass a turn. And get back Reese, although probably won't get a chance to activate it. Could go for Hasty Ruby, which we can play next turn. Alright, let's see if they can steal this one. We're at 2, but we've got ample blockers. A sweeper would be painful. And Death Rite, once it activates, could be game over. Ooh, and Sephiroth. Ouch. Well, I guess we got punished for playing Lotho after all. Was not expecting the Sephiroth out of nowhere. So we're gonna lose one to Lotho and then one more to Sephiroth. So our opponent snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. Although, to be fair, even without Lotho, our opponent gets to attack, and then no matter what, some creatures are gonna die, triggering Sephiroth again in the process. So it was really Sephiroth that sealed the deal. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing the Mycotyrant, so kind of a self-mill descent deck. Our hand's got potential. Detention Sphere is actually a pretty funny answer to a whole bunch of 1/1 fungus tokens from the opponent, so that might come up. But for now, Signet into Cultivator, and then if Mizzet's one of our best cards. So can wait on the fetch lands. Since it does need to get several colors, Hallowed Fountain I guess is good too. The Cultivator's gonna get a basic. And then I might still want black mana in case Signet gets destroyed. Opponent's got their own, it's only fair. Have to be careful not to Detention Sphere Signet, since I believe it would exile both. But for now we can play Cultivator. And get a forest. And then next turn it might be time for Niv Mizzet. Tribute can go for cards or counters. But we'll see what Niv Mizzet can find. Alright, answer is a lot. So we get a Bloodbraid Elf, Binding, Analysis, Golbez, Oath of Kaya, and Reflector Mage. So I'm gonna have to discard to hand size. I can maybe just play a tap land and end up fetching a basic. No attacks. Discard 2 cards. So yeah, nothing's terrible. Maybe Oath of Kaya is a little slow. And could maybe ditch a land, although I could regret that later. Still like the Detention Sphere. Binding can remove something and ramp. Maybe the Analysis is not all that exciting either. Even though it could take care of an Elvish Mystic. Probably want to deploy a few more permanents before we play Guideline Station. And a Bone Shard takes out Niv Mizzet. And Marionette can mill a few more cards. So yeah, they're already going to make a few tokens of Mycotyrant. A good target for Reflector Mage, because that means they can't replay it for another turn. And all those tokens pick up +1 counters. So that's also problematic. So I could first binding the World Tree, so that doesn't bother us going forward. And then I can still Reflector Mage. And then I'm going to be taking quite a bit of damage, but next turn I can maybe Detention Sphere all the Fungus tokens. Or I can just go for Fungus first, let them keep Tribute for a turn. And then just go Sphere plus Reflector Mage. Yeah, that seems reasonable too. So all tokens are gone. Unbounce your Tyrants. And play a tap land. Okay, next turn it might be time for binding on tributes. Okay, maybe Bloodbraid Elf as well. And Garruk's not bad either. Although I should probably binding the tributes, otherwise those tokens are gonna grow again. And then I can still spin the wheel with Bloodbraid Elf. We'll just fetch a mountain, keep our life total high. So I'll start here. Hit a Root Coil Creeper, just a ramp creature. Tribute down. And pass a turn, don't have any good attacks. So the 1/1 tokens are a little bit more manageable than 3/3s. Supplier will mill 3, good way to set up Descend. Bird hits us for 2. And our opponent makes 3 1/1s. Find a tri-land. So Garruk making wolves is an option. And then next turn I can play Station, making a lot of tokens. Could also destroy their commander. Although it's not too difficult for them to redeploy. Right now I've got 6 multicolored, so that's not bad, but we could make it more. Play Collector. Play Garruk. Suppose I could have tapped differently to still play the Follower, but I can probably sneak it in next turn. So we can save ourselves a bit of damage. Pass a turn back. And then Station's looking good. Also get to give my team Death Touch. Could also be relevant if we want to attack. So I do end up losing 1 multicolored permanent at least. If our opponent's got a Crater Hoof, we could still maybe die, but yeah, that'll do it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Surrak, so a green Stompy deck. So you can expect turn 1 Acceleration, turn 2 3-drop. Our hand's got a Leyline Binding, which can help us catch up. So I'll try it. And we have the tools to cast a 1-mana Binding on turn 2 already. Let's see. Yeah, I should still probably play Garden and then turn 2 Skull Prophet. But I could get a tap Tri-Land and then Binding for 1 mana. Alright, Paw Patch doesn't bother me too much. So in that case, can get a Swamp. And then if I get an Island, I'll be able to Binding for 1, maybe alongside Faber Elder. Ooh, Hunter's Talent takes out Skull Prophet. Was not necessarily expecting a ton of removal early on, so that works. Alright, still going for Fabero. So I can get Plains, although then I'm missing Islands, so I should probably just get Hallowed Fountain. So now we also lost a color for the Faber Elder. Now they've got the mana creature, no third land it seems. And a sniper can get in the way. So this turn probably go for Garruk. And then, yeah, won't be able to play anything else like Reese first. Can just get a forest here. Maybe mountain makes more sense. Play Garruk. Don't want to attack first because of Death Touch. Make some wolves. And that's also increasing our multicolor count for station. So I can try and play that next turn. Kami can get their forests. We're happy to trade the wolves as it increases our loyalty. Alright, so possible I could have fetched a little differently, but I think Deserted Beach means I can now still play the station, and then Faboro can make 5 mana. Or I can first just play Reese, so we get an extra multicolored spell, and then of course activate Garruk. Play station, still have binding available. And could start stationing at least a little bit. Probably enough. Pass a turn. And then Reese could also double my tokens next turn, which would be pretty fun. Steel Leaf Champion, that's a blast from the past, from Dominaria. That resolves. So no real need to use the binding. So now we've got a wealth of great options. Roxanne, one of them too. But yeah, let's say we make more tokens and then just activate Reese. Could play Roxanne and then Fabero still lets me activate Reese. So let's say we start here. Damage your, not sure, Cobra maybe. Triggers Recruits. Counter on Steel Leaf. Now Steel Leaf can potentially attack past a bunch of tokens, so we still have to be a little careful. But yeah, let's make more tokens. Maybe should have kept Roxanne available to chump Steel Leaf if necessary. Alright, so now we can go to attackers. Opponent does get to trade for Sniper, which I could have taken out with Roxanne. But I'll get my value here, so I don't mind. And then can get in with all the tokens. And then Reese we can activate at instant speed. Draw a bunch of cards. Didn't want to activate Reese first, because then we're going to draw too many and have to discard too much to hand size. Alright, and then I'll activate Reese now. Opponent's at 1, so we're giving them a chance to kill us with a Steel Leaf Champion to keep it exciting. Discard 5 to hand size. And don't need the Creeper. Couple more lands. Alright. So if they can double Steel Leaf's power somehow, we could still die. A Monstrous Onslaught takes care of a bunch of tokens. But that's it. So we can still block. GG's. Take 6. And then now a couple ways we could end the game. But a Garruk emblem seems fitting. And smash. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, facing the infamous Cruelclaw. So if that hits, it could be game over. Luckily have the analysis to answer it once, although they might have a discard spell for it. Psychic Frog is reasonable, although unlikely to survive. So our hand's keepable, but I don't have incredibly high hopes for this matchup. So good thing that they didn't go Swamp discard spell. Alright, nothing so far, so I can play Psychic Frog. And then that same mana can also cast Analysis next turn. Still a chance they can give Cruelclaw haste with the Arena, so then they could connect right away. And yeah, speak of the devil. So they get a free attack with Cruelclaw. We'll see what they reveal. Hopefully nothing too pricey. Ulamog the Defiler. Yeah, that's game over. So exile the top half of my library. Get a 13/13 with Annihilator 6. Take my turn. So my sorcery speed answer for Cruelclaw is not quite gonna cut it, I'm afraid. Take it out. Psychic Frog is just gonna get sacrificed to Annihilator. I'm gonna lose all my permanents. So, yeah, there's no real point in doing anything else here. GG's. And we were outmatched. Ulamog attacks. And goodbye all my permanents. Take 13. Next turn take another 13. And yeah, that's it. Yeah, Magic can be a funny game sometimes. So that probably explains why they kept that hand and didn't do anything in the first 2 turns. That's because they had the Arena. So it did not really come as a shock. Cruelclaw's back with haste. And our opponent's gonna drag this one out. It's an Ugin. So our opponent's probably gonna not attack all out and just hit with a Cruelclaw, putting us to 1, but then I can just fetch myself to death. Or the opponent wants to set up an Ugin ultimate. Yep, just Cruelclaw attacking. So we're not going to give them the satisfaction of getting another turn here. Juggle the performance. Alright, I guess I discard my hand after all, so... Now I don't even have the fetch lane to take myself out of the game. And I'm not even sure what happens. We've got a handful of basics. Alright, fine. You get one more turn. Aren't alchemy cards great? Ugin's gonna ultimate. They already milled Emrakul. I'm sure they've got more Emrakuls to steal my turn. The Promised End. Enjoy casting a basic land. Nothing for Ulamog to exile. In fact, they have to exile their own permanents. Take that. So our opponent's just playing with their food now. Of course, we could have conceded a while ago. Our opponent's having fun paying for their spells. Can't deal myself 2 damage, sadly. So our opponent's controlling me right now. Alright, and now it's our turn. Can play Ruby. And the attack will do it. Alright, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Gretchen, blue-green, kind of ramp counter spells, is how I would describe it. Our hand is pretty low to the ground with a bit of ramp, so that's kind of where we want to be in this matchup. So fetching is a little bit complicated here. Maybe want to start with a tapped tri-land, and then I can grow spiral into Reese, or Ruby into Reese would work too. So I need to get maybe, let's see, don't have a Sultai Triome, since that's not one of the new Capenna ones. Do want to get blue, black, plus something else. I guess Xander's Lounge is fine. Now Merleaf Pixie, also an option. Yeah, maybe I just start with Pixie. Although Ruby lets me play Reese right away. I could go for the Forest, although I might regret that later. Let's get a Stomping Ground, got a few red cards in hand. Just play Pixie. And then next turn I can maybe double spell. Opponent actually had the Spell Snare, so it didn't matter what 2-drop I cast. Not a card you see every day, but I guess if you're playing the blue-green counterspell deck, you want to play quite a few counterspells. So there's Gretchen. So I get 1 turn to maybe resolve something. Can go Ruby into Arabella, which I kind of like. So we're already set up to play Station, if we'd like. Although I might want to get some more multicolored permanents in play first. At least Arabella also deals a bit of damage in the meantime, so our opponent can't sit back forever. And the Blood Spatter, also a way to finish off Gretchen. So let's say I attack with Arabella, maybe after playing Reese. I can play Analysis. And then I could still Growth Spiral, is that correct? I guess we're missing an extra black source or blue source for that to work. So I can't quite cast everything. So then maybe I just attack, see if they block. And then I can go Analysis, put Gigantha in hand, maybe. And Gretchen blocks. Opponent negates. Still feels like a small victory. And then let's go for Gigantha, as it's a bit more mana efficient than just playing Reese. Station also could have gotten negated. Opponent says no to a Whelming Wave, which actually could be quite effective in the matchup, so makes me concerned about what they have in hand. Hostage Taker I currently cannot cast since we're missing blue and black, so I actually cannot even cast the Guideline Station. Alright, I mean, whatever I play next is getting countered. Could go for Reese. Maybe they let that sneak into play. Nope, Stern Scolding, also an effective answer for 1 mana. So they still have a 1 and a blue up, but not double blue. So I'll Spiral, see what we hit. opponent with a Dispute now. Another very conditional counterspell. Alright, attack. Getting a little bit of damage in. But our mana is stalling out. Should have maybe gone for a different land. Unable to scream, a good answer to Arabella. And an Eaten by Piranhas shuts down Ruby. Did not draw the land to be able to play Gigantha, so that's too bad. But now Farseek can fix my colors going forward. So I need another blue or black source, can make it both. And then no point in attacking anymore. Opponent at least not hitting their land drops, which means they can't start activating Gretchen. I guess we go for Gigantha, although if they mana drain me, I'm gonna be quite sad. Yeah, I think Prosper would be more important to resolve. Opponent forced to use a Serenade. So they're running the full gamut of conditional counter spells here. And now there's a Nissa, so Coast might be clear. Good Hostage Taker. Steal Nissa. Or I could go for Prosper. Feels like a Hostage Taker situation. Opponent's already struggling to make mana. Question now is, do I play the land or save it for Nissa? I mean, probably fine to play it, even though I'm not guaranteed to go Nissa plus Prosper now. With a fetch land, we would be good. So we'll start here. I'm curious if we have any elves or elementals to find with landfall, but they're probably just going to counter here, so we don't get to find out. Alright, that does resolve. We have a fetch land. So we can trigger Nissa twice, making, let's say, green. Could also try the Guideline Station, although we've got a pretty low number of multicolored permanents. And then I could get another tri-land, I suppose. Unless we were to draw an elf or elemental, I guess Deathrite Shaman's an elf that I could cast. Alright, Bloodbraid Elf also counts. So the Cascade mechanic's pretty good in the face of counter spells. Find a Bloom Tender. So that can make a boatload of mana. And smash. Opponent falls to 9. So next turn I can play Prosper into Station. Opponent's gonna go wide with Scute Swarm now. They finally hit their land. Is it too little too late? Play Prosper. Can even play Glissa, assuming I have all colors, which seems to be the case. Because yeah, Arabella still counts as a white permanent we control. And now play Station. Opponent's gonna have a Wash Away, Spell Pierce instead, wow. Alright, I mean, that hurts. Could have played around it, I suppose. But it's not gonna be too difficult to redeploy next turn. So the selection of 1-mana counters continues. Faber Elder, a juiced up version of Bloom Tender. Opponent finally activates Gretchen. And says good game. And then we get to cast the Guideline Station and resolve it. We're probably not going to get that satisfaction. And our opponent scoops it up. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Chulane, so a banned creature card draw deck. Our hand's got potential. We've got some early ramp, so that'll help in setting up the station. Start by getting a tapped tri-land that produces a green. Opponent's got the turn 1 ramp. Don't have a lot of those myself. So we want green. And then, yeah, let's see here. I already have blue and black. And green, white, red, of course, not an option with polluted delta. So I'll get the proving ground. And then turn to Bloom Tender. Next turn I can go Lotho into Signet, perhaps. I guess never mind, I don't have white mana until I play Signet. So then I'm not going to be able to play Lotho and get a treasure. Opponent with turn 2 Nissa. And a Kairos follower. So if I play the follower first, Bloom Tender makes an extra mana, which doesn't do a whole lot for me yet, but still seems worth it. And then play Signet into Lotho. So still a decent turn. Just missed out on a treasure. Opponent gets to trigger Landfall twice, so they can easily deploy Chulane already. They're also incentivized to cast one spell as opposed to double spelling, or else we'll get a treasure. Finds a Provisioner, another good landfall payoff. And there's Chulane. But we do get to untap with quite a bit of mana ourselves, so can't complain. So follower can untap Bloom Tender, which can make a bunch of mana as well. I'll get a Sacred Foundry in case something bad happens to the Signets. So I can play Swarmweaver. Play Detention Sphere. And then play Station. And get rid of Chulane so they don't get to draw a million cards. This is turn 4. And yeah, we're gonna make a significant amount of robots, 7. We'll start stationing as well. So next turn we can attack. Just gotta hope they don't have a River's Rebuke to send everything packing. That would be painful. Just a Provisioner. Although that's probably gonna pay for itself if they have a fetch land. Nope, just a tapped Glasspool Shore. So 3 mana left. Do we get to untap and get an attack in with Infinite Guideline Station? And during Vitality we get a treasure. And take 3. Alright, Cloth is also a good pickup. So make a bunch of mana, Gigantha in hand. Can cast Gigantha, which can station, and then another token can be tapped as well. Play Clothis, which triggers Lotho. Probably fine to attack all out, maybe keep follower available, which can untap the station to have a large blocker back, unless this is lethal. So 7 in the air, opponent's at 16. Another 2 in the air, opponent's at 14. Block, block, take 12. So yeah, this would actually be Xaxes if we go all out. Draw a card for each multicolored permanent, but we're not gonna need them. So yeah, this was a beautiful start, thanks to Bloom Tender and Follower untapping it. But if the math is correct, this should be lethal. Could have also stationed with Insect instead of a 2-2 for 1 more damage. And there we go, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing the Black-Red Wizard deck. Our hand's got potential. So I need to play Deserted Beach and then get an untapped green source to play Pixie on 2. And then which color besides green? Has to be either blue or white. With this hand, probably make it blue since we've got a bunch of other blue cards in hand. Now I'm leaning white since we picked up Watery Grave. And green, white. And then we've got black, red, so we've got most of our colors taken care of. Opponent with their first wizard, dealing damage when they cast non-creature spells. Chromox is exciting. Or do I double 2-drop here anyway? So this would make blue, white, blue, black. Yeah, I mean, I get to surveil here as well, so I can maybe look for something else to pitch to the Chromox. Mountain, not quite what I need. Thopteryx eats an Abrade. Could have also taken out the Pixie, so I'm fine with that. Black Rat's gonna struggle to destroy enchantments. And I'll play defense. My 2 damage is not worth the opponent's 2 damage. Palantir. It's gonna make me lose a bit more life. Bottom bottomed. And the land means no damage. Alright, so we've got plenty of mana available now. Can play Station. And then still have enough mana to put Giganta in hand. A little bit short of casting Giganta first. But now we get to surveil a bunch. I'll look for our next exciting play. Pilgrim would be a source of life gain, but I've already made my tokens. So we can probably do better. Skull Prophet also not that great. Alright, so we got to see this 5-color Infinite Guideline Station deck in action, and it can be fun if you finally get your commander going and manage to station it, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. More often than not, you're just going to get run over by much more efficient commanders that can close out the game very quickly. Our deck is essentially always playing a turn behind, as we need to make room for these multicolored spells that usually start out at 2 mana, whereas the opponent could already be ramping on turn 1. So yeah, we're usually playing catch-up, and our answers aren't necessarily all that great, since we're not playing a ton of cheap interaction. We don't have any board wipes, since we want to build up our multicolored permanents. So we're essentially putting ourselves at a disadvantage, and in 1v1, where you're the only target, that's usually not going to work out too well for you. In multiplayer, I could see this deck working out much better, or you can simply swap the Infinite Guideline Station commander with one of the 2 Niv Mizzets, which is probably the best way to make the deck a bit more competitive. Niv Mizzet Guild Pact doesn't need a ton of adjustments, since you already want to be playing with multicolored permanents, so that's a pretty easy swap. Maybe lose a few cards that care about artifacts, and then if you choose to play Niv Mizzet Reborn instead, you probably want to make a lot more adjustments, since you just need multicolored spells and not necessarily multicolored permanents, so then you'll have access to much more interaction, sweepers as well, which help you play a longer game, which is where Niv Mizzet Reborn shines, as you can leverage those extra cards a lot better. So I would not recommend the station for Brawl, but it was still a fun experiment that was worth a try. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.